Nobody saw this coming. One minute, the internet was calm, and the next, everything exploded around Candace Owens and a name most people hadn't even heard before, Erika Kirk. It started with a DNA reveal. Sounds simple, right? It wasn't, because within hours, rumors spiraled out of control. Timelines stopped making sense, and people began asking questions no one was ready to answer. But then, something changed. Receipts started surfacing. Old clips, deleted posts, and suddenly, this wasn't just gossip, it was personal. And this is where it gets strange, because the deeper people dug, the messier it got. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew. So here's where everything actually begins. Candace Owens had already been trending. Not unusual. She's no stranger to controversy. But this time, it wasn't about politics. It was something way more personal. Something no one expected her to put out publicly. She hinted at it first. A cryptic post. No names, no context, just enough to spark curiosity. People brushed it off until she dropped it. A DNA-related claim that instantly pulled another name into the spotlight, Erika Kirk. And just like that, the internet split in two. Some people believed Candace immediately. Others were confused. Because here's the problem. Erika Kirk wasn't exactly a household name. There wasn't much public information, no clear backstory, which made everything feel even more suspicious. So people started digging. Old social media accounts were suddenly being analyzed. Comments from years ago were being screenshotted. People were trying to connect dots that, at first, didn't even look related. But then, something changed. A few users claimed they had seen this situation before. Not the exact story, but the pattern. Sudden reveal, missing details, emotional reactions. It felt strategic to some. And that's when things started falling apart. Because instead of clearing things up, more questions started flooding in. Why now? Why make this public? And what exactly did the DNA reveal prove? And it doesn't stop there. Because while people were still trying to understand the basics, new claims started surfacing. Claims that made the entire situation way more complicated than anyone expected. At first, it felt like just another internet storm. Loud for a moment, then gone. But this one didn't fade. It grew. Fast. People weren't just reacting anymore. They were investigating. Clips of Candace Owens started resurfacing, not recent ones. Old interviews, podcast moments, random offhand comments that, at the time, meant nothing. But now, people were treating them like clues. And this is where it gets strange. Some viewers began pointing out tiny inconsistencies, dates that didn't quite line up, statements that seemed to contradict each other, nothing huge on its own. But together, it started to feel off. Then the attention shifted to Erika Kirk, and that's when things really took off. Because the more people searched, the less they found. No clear digital footprint, no strong public presence. It was like she appeared out of nowhere, right at the center of this chaos. But then something changed. A few accounts claimed they had interacted with Erika before. Old comments started appearing. Some supportive, some confused, some straight up calling the situation weird, even back then. Screenshots spread like wildfire. Now the internet had something it loves more than anything: mystery. And people went all in. Threads started forming, long ones, breaking down timelines minute by minute. Who said what, when they said it, and what might have been happening behind the scenes. But here's the problem. Not everyone was looking for the truth. Some were just adding fuel. Rumors started evolving. What began as a DNA reveal quickly turned into something bigger. Questions about relationships, identity, and whether this had been hidden for years. And suddenly, people weren't just asking, "Is this true?" They were asking, "What else hasn't been said?" That's when things started falling apart, because a few posts surfaced that didn't match the narrative being built. Claims that directly contradicted what people thought they knew. And instead of slowing things down, it made everything worse. Now there were two completely different versions of the story floating around. One that supported Candace, one that raised serious doubts. And the gap between them kept growing. And it doesn't stop there. Because right when it felt like things couldn't get more chaotic, new voices entered the conversation. People claiming insider knowledge, People saying they had seen documents, heard conversations, knew what was really going on. No proof, just confidence. And somehow, that was enough to keep the fire burning. Meanwhile, neither Candace Owens nor Erika Kirk fully stepped in to shut it down. No clear timeline, no detailed explanation, just silence in the middle of noise. And that silence, it made everything louder. Because now people weren't just reacting to what was said, they were reacting to what wasn't said. And the longer that silence lasted, the more intense the speculation became. So the questions started shifting again. Not what happened, but what are they not telling us? That question, what are they not telling us, is what pushed this whole situation into overdrive. Because once people started looking for what wasn't being said, they started finding things no one expected. The timeline became the battlefield. Internet detectives began mapping everything out. Every post from Candace Owens, every mention, direct or indirect, of Erika Kirk. Dates were lined up, events compared, gaps highlighted. And this is where it gets strange. There were holes, big ones, moments where, according to one version of the story, something major should have happened. But there was nothing. No posts, no references, just silence. And in internet terms, silence is suspicious. But then something changed. A few users claimed they had found older, archived pages, not easily accessible stuff. Deep scroll content. Screenshots began circulating, some blurry, some cropped, some oddly specific. They showed interactions that didn't fit the clean narrative people were trying to build. And suddenly, everything got messy. Because depending on which evidence you believed, the story looked completely different. In one version, Candace seemed fully aware of the situation for a long time. Calm, calculated, waiting for the right moment. In another, she looked blindsided. Like this reveal hit just as hard for her as it did for everyone else. Two timelines, same people, totally different meanings. But here's the problem. Neither side could fully prove their version. And that uncertainty, it made the internet even louder. People began picking sides, not based on facts, but on instinct, on who they trusted more, on who seemed more believable. And it doesn't stop there. Because the conversation started shifting again, this time toward motive. Why would Candace Owens bring this up now? Was it personal, strategic, emotional? Some argued it was about truth finally coming out. Others believed it was too perfectly timed to be random. And then there was the question no one could answer. What did Erika Kirk actually want? Because up until this point, she still hadn't clearly stepped forward. No detailed statement, no full explanation, just fragments, mentions, silence. And that silence, it started to feel intentional. That's when things started falling apart. Because without direct answers, people filled in the blanks themselves. Speculation turned into theories. Theories turned into facts, and facts became whatever people wanted them to be. Some claimed there were private conversations happening behind the scenes. Others said legal pressure might be involved. A few even suggested that what we were seeing publicly was only a fraction of a much bigger situation. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because once legal talk enters the picture, even as a rumor, it changes everything. Now it's not just drama, it's risk. And still, no one fully stepped in to clarify. No full timeline, no complete receipts, no clear resolution, just pieces, floating everywhere. So the story kept stretching, growing, twisting into something far bigger than a simple DNA reveal. And by now, people weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting for someone, anyone, to finally break the silence and say something that would make all of this make sense. But that moment, it still hadn't come. And that silence, it didn't calm anything down. It made everything worse. Because when people don't get answers, they create their own. And that's exactly what started happening. Entire breakdown videos popped up overnight. Threads turned into full-on documentaries. Everyone was trying to piece together the story of Candace Owens and Erika Kirk like it was some kind of puzzle. But then something changed. A new layer entered the conversation. Not just what happened, but how long it may have been happening. People began digging deeper into timelines, not just recent ones, but years back. And suddenly, small details that once felt irrelevant started looking intentional. Old photos, old captions, subtle references that didn't mean anything before. But now, they felt loaded. And this is where it gets strange. Some users claimed there were overlaps, moments where both names appeared in similar circles, similar conversations, similar spaces, without ever directly acknowledging each other. Coincidence? Maybe. But online, coincidences don't stay coincidences for long. They turn into theories, and those theories started spreading fast. One of the biggest questions now wasn't just about the DNA reveal, it was about awareness. Who knew what? And when? Because if even a fraction of these connections were real, it would mean this situation wasn't sudden at all. It had history, and that changes everything. But here's the problem. There was still no confirmation, just patterns, screenshots, interpretations. And yet, people were becoming more convinced by the hour. That's when things started falling apart, because the more evidence surfaced, the more contradictions appeared alongside it. One post would suggest long-term knowledge, another would imply total surprise. One timeline would say this was building for years, another would claim it all happened recently. Both couldn't be true, but both had believers. And it doesn't stop there, because emotions started taking over. What began as curiosity turned into debate, then arguments, then full-on online battles. People weren't just analyzing anymore, they were defending their version of the story. And once that happens, objectivity disappears. Suddenly, every new piece of information wasn't judged on accuracy. It was judged on which side it supported. And that made everything even messier. Meanwhile, Candace Owens remained selective with what she addressed. Small responses, carefully chosen words. Nothing that fully explained the situation. And Erika Kirk? Still no full, clear narrative, just enough presence to keep people watching, but not enough to settle anything. And that silence started to feel louder than any statement, because now people weren't just asking questions about the past. They were questioning what was happening right now. Were things being handled privately? Was there a reason for holding back? Or was this entire situation spiraling beyond anyone's control? And this is where the tension really spikes. Because at this point, no answer would satisfy everyone, even if the truth came out completely, clean, clear, undeniable, half the internet wouldn't believe it. That's how divided things had become. So now the story wasn't just about a DNA reveal anymore. It was about perception, control, and who gets to define the truth. And just when it felt like things couldn't get any more chaotic, they did. They did. Because right when the noise hit its peak, something unexpected happened. People stopped just speculating and started connecting dots in real time. Live, streams, reaction videos, breakdowns. Everyone was watching every move from Candace Owens like it might contain a hidden message. Every pause, every word choice, every post. And this is where it gets strange. Even the smallest updates started triggering massive reactions. A single sentence could spark thousands of comments. A vague reply could send entire communities into analysis mode. But then something changed. A few creators claimed they had inside sources. Not confirmed, not verified, but confident. They started dropping details that hadn't been mentioned before. Private conversations, supposed timelines, claims about what really happened behind closed doors. And instantly, the stakes shot up. Because now it wasn't just public information anymore, it felt like secrets were leaking. And that's when things started falling apart. Because the more these insider claims spread, the harder it became to separate fact from fiction. Some stories were dramatic, almost too dramatic. Others felt oddly specific, like they could be true. But here's the problem. No one could verify any of it. Still, that didn't slow things down. In fact, it made everything worse. Because once people want something to be true, they stop questioning it. And it doesn't stop there. The conversation started turning darker. It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It became personal. People began picking apart motives in a much harsher way. Accusations started flying. Words like manipulation, agenda, and cover-up started showing up more and more. And suddenly, this wasn't just internet drama. It felt like something bigger, more serious, more real. Meanwhile, Erika Kirk became the center of a completely different storm. Because while Candace was being analyzed for what she said, Erika was being analyzed for what she didn't say. Her silence became its own kind of statement. People questioned everything: her timing, her absence, even the way her name appeared in conversations. And that silence, it started to divide people even more. Some saw it as restraint. Others saw it as avoidance. And neither side was backing down. But then something shifted again. A few posts began circulating that suggested this situation might not stay online. That maybe, just maybe, this could move into something official. No confirmation, just hints. And that changed everything. Because once the idea of real-world consequences enters the conversation, the tone changes instantly. Now, people weren't just watching for drama, they were watching for fallout. And this is where the tension peaks, because at this point, the story had outgrown everyone involved. It was no longer just about Candace Owens or Erika Kirk. It had become a full-blown internet phenomenon. Millions of eyes, thousands of theories, zero clear answers. And the longer it stayed unresolved, the more intense it became. Every hour without clarity added more pressure. Every new rumor raised the stakes. And deep down, everyone was waiting for the same thing. A moment. One statement, one piece of proof, one reveal that would finally cut through the noise and show what was actually real. But when that moment finally came, It didn't calm anything down. It made everything explode. And when that moment finally hit, it didn't feel like clarity. It felt like a shockwave. Because instead of answering everything, it flipped the entire narrative on its head. What people thought the DNA reveal meant wasn't exactly what it meant. And this is where everything changes. The information that surfaced didn't give a clean, simple answer. It introduced nuance, details that didn't fit the black and white story people had been arguing over for days. Some connections people were sure about, not as solid as they believed. Some assumptions that felt like facts, suddenly questionable. But then something changed. The focus shifted from who's right to what does this actually prove? And that's where it got uncomfortable, because the reveal, while real, didn't fully support either extreme side of the internet debate. It sat somewhere in the middle, which is the one place the internet struggles to handle. For Candace Owens, this meant some of her claims looked more grounded than critics wanted to admit, but also less definitive than supporters had been insisting. For Erika Kirk, it meant the mystery around her didn't disappear. It just shifted. And that's when things started falling apart. Again. Because instead of settling the situation, the reveal created a new wave of arguments. People began reinterpreting everything. Old clips were reanalyzed with this new context. Past statements suddenly sounded different. Even silence took on a new meaning. And it doesn't stop there. Because one detail, one small but crucial detail, stood out to people paying close attention. The reveal explained a connection, but it didn't explain the timing. And that reopened the biggest question of all. Why now? Why bring this to light in this exact moment, with this exact framing? That question didn't go away. It got louder. Because now, instead of arguing over what was true, people were questioning intent. And intent? That's where things get messy. Because facts can be proven. Motives? They're interpreted. And once the conversation shifts into interpretation, there's no clean ending. Just perspectives. Conflicting ones. And that's exactly where this story landed. And when that moment finally dropped, everything people thought they understood started collapsing. Because the DNA reveal, it wasn't the clean, undeniable proof everyone expected. It was messier. Way messier. At first glance, it confirmed a link, enough to make people stop and go, wait, hold on. But then, something changed. The deeper people looked, the more complicated it became. The results didn't spell out a simple story. They suggested a connection, but not in the way the internet had already decided. Not a straight line, more like a web. And this is where it gets strange. Because suddenly, both sides of the argument were partially right and partially wrong. Supporters of Candace Owens felt validated. There was something there. This wasn't random. This wasn't made up. But critics? They weren't completely off either. Because the reveal didn't fully back the strongest claims people had been pushing. It left gaps. Big ones. And those gaps? They became the new battlefield. That's when things started falling apart. Again. Because instead of ending the debate, the reveal split it into even more directions. People started zooming in on technicalities. What exactly does the DNA prove? What doesn't it prove? How close is the connection, really? Suddenly, everyone became an expert. Charts, explanations, breakdowns. But here's the problem. Most of it was interpretation. And interpretation, that's where bias creeps in. So now, instead of one chaotic narrative, there were 5 different versions of the truth circulating at the same time. And it doesn't stop there. Because one detail, small but explosive, kept coming up in serious discussions. The DNA results suggested a connection, but it didn't explain the delay. If this link existed, why reveal it now? Why not earlier? Why not privately? And that question hit harder than anything else, because facts can settle arguments. But timing creates suspicion. And once suspicion enters the story, everything gets re-examined. Every past statement from Candace Owens suddenly felt more strategic. Every moment of silence from Erika Kirk started to feel more intentional. And this is where the entire narrative flips. Because the story was never just about what the DNA revealed. It was about why it was revealed at all. And that question, That's the one nobody has been able to answer. And when you step back from all the noise, all the clips, the timelines, the theories, a different picture starts to form. This was never just about DNA. It felt like it at first. A shocking reveal. A moment that pulled Candace Owens and Erika Kirk into the same spotlight. But the deeper this went, the more it became about something else entirely. Control. Who controls the narrative? Who decides what version of the story people believe? Because here's what actually happened. The moment the reveal went public, the story stopped belonging to the people involved. It belonged to the internet. And the internet doesn't wait for full context. It fills gaps instantly. Sometimes correctly, sometimes completely wrong. But then something changed. The lack of clear answers didn't slow things down. It amplified everything. It gave space for interpretation. And once people start interpreting instead of listening, the truth gets buried under opinions. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Even with a real DNA result, even with something tangible, no one walked away fully convinced. Because facts alone weren't enough anymore. People wanted intent, motive, meaning, and those things, they're never universally agreed on. So what you're left with isn't a solved mystery. It's a divided narrative. One story, multiple versions, and depending on who you ask, a completely different truth. So now we're left with more questions than answers. A DNA reveal that confirmed something, but not everything. A story that pulled Candace Owens and Erika Kirk into the same spotlight, but never fully explained why it had to happen this way. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive clean, it arrives messy, incomplete, open to interpretation. But here's the question you can't ignore. Was this about revealing the truth or controlling the narrative? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want more deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe.